This class, this training specifically is for the purpose of understanding the electronic plan review process. So I am not an expert in how planning works or how DBI works. So if you ask those questions in the chat, unfortunately, I won't be able to answer those questions for you. But if you have questions regarding the electronic plan review process, that's where we're going to have some answers. So let's start by talking about some of the resources that are available, because I'm going to be showing a whole bunch of different documents and procedures as we go through this. And you're going to be wondering to yourself, where do I get these procedures? Where do these procedures come from? And the answer here is basically here in sf.gov. So I'm just right here in sf.gov, not in any fancy location here in sf.gov. I'm really right at the starting page. And let's remember why we're here. We're here to basically get a building permit. So if we go to building and building permits right here, what we're looking for is what this class is about. What we're learning today is the electronic plan review process to obtain building permits. And so here in the building permits section in sf.gov, as you scroll down, what you're going to see is you're going to see a lot of resources. So there is a whole electronic plan review section for you, and that has some of, the back check page, which we're going to cover. It talks about how to submit for a site permit, how to submit for a building permit, just learning about the permit review process. All of that is there. If you keep scrolling down a little bit further, there is an actual resources page for EPR. So again, when you're watching this and when you're thinking to yourself, where do I get that application? Where do I get that application? Where do I get that procedure that Troy is showing me? Where do I get that information? The answer is here in sf.gov in the building permits in the resources section. So again, that back check page, we'll see that soon. Creating your plans, all of this is covered. And then in addition, there's the procedure for electronic plan review, which is here in the bottom in the documents that are available for you. So one last time to get there, we go to sf.gov, we go to building, we go to building permits, right? That's why we're here, right? To get a building permit. And then we scroll down. And when you scroll down, you'll see the resources that are available to you. So what we're going to start with today is we're going to start with the procedure for electronic plan review. We're going to start with that procedure and we're going to talk about it. Now, I wanted to mention one more thing before we get going, and that is that this particular training is really workflow based. So it's really not about how to use Bluebeam and how to, make a markup or respond or anything else. What it's really about is the specific tasks within Bluebeam that are related to this particular workflow. So I'm not showing you the basics, but if you are interested in learning the basics, if you go to Bluebeam Technical Support, they have a whole bunch of training videos on how to navigate around, how to edit your documents, how to, go through document security and everything else. So I'm not here to teach you all the basics of Bluebeam. I am here to teach you the electronic plan review process using the procedures that's available and then using the resources that are available. There's documents on how to create your plans, all sorts of info here at sf.gov. So let's go ahead and talk about this procedure. I'm going to be taking you through the table of contents, and here I'm going to be kind of getting you going with using this procedure because really this is the resource for you to be able to understand this entire process. And it's not only a resource, but it's also a really like a manual, almost a training manual to speak. So for example, if I am interested, these are some of the requirements. And when I go to these, it actually shows specifically how to do this, what buttons to click on here inside of Bluebeam to actually get you through these steps as we're submitting. So as we're submitting, as we're getting this going, we will want to understand that I'm not going to be covering page by page this procedure, but I'm going to be taking you through that. So that's getting started, and really we're going to start kind of in the beginning of this table of contents. And what the first thing I'm going to talk to you about is creating a brand new studio account. So again, when you're using Bluebeam, when we're involved in this electronic plan review process, what we need to do is we need to actually join into what's called a studio session. And to join into a studio session, you need to have a Bluebeam Studio account. So let's talk about that. Now, I'm going to be showing you buttons as we go through Bluebeam here. And the one thing I want you to remember as I'm showing you these buttons is that these buttons are not always going to be in the place where you see it on my screen. So on my screen, I'm going to be starting with this studio button right here. On your screen, it may be over on the left-hand side, it may be down here, it may be somewhere else, it may not even be there. You may have to click show, and you may have to show the studio button in order to find it. So if you know, there's ways you can show and turn it on if it's turned off, but just note that you're looking for buttons, and when I'm showing you buttons, just know what they look like, not where they're located. Okay, so let's get started. One of the first things we're going to do when we're working with Bluebeam is we need to set up an account. So I need to sign into Bluebeam to create an account. You see the create account button is right here. And when you're creating an account, it's pretty cut and dry. You're basically filling it out with your name, your email, and creating a password. But one thing I want to point out, when you are putting together your display name, it's important that that display name has a specific format to it. So I'm going to set it here. What you want is you want your full name, and then you want the company you work for. So in this case, you know, I'm just filling it in right now randomly, but that information right here that you see right here, this display name is important because the display name is what shows up when you come into the Bluebeam Studio session. So all this other stuff is pretty self-explanatory. Creating an email or creating a name, email, password, all that, can create account. It'll verify your account, and you'll be able then to come and you'll need to sign in. But when you sign in, just note that we're going to want to make sure that that account name that we have is set up, that display name is set up. So I'm going to go ahead and log in now, because let's assume you've already created an account, you've done your verification, you've gotten now to the point where you're ready to sign in. I'll go ahead and do that. And when I sign in, what it's going to do is it's going to basically make Studio available to me now. So instead of just having that Studio button, I actually now can see Studio projects and Studio sessions. Now there may not be any, or you may have a really long list. It doesn't really matter either way. Before we get to the Studio part, we need to do a few more things. And remember, I mentioned that display name, and I said that display name is really important. What we want to do now is we want to come over to review on the top left, and we want to come down to preferences. And inside of preferences, there are a couple places where the display name shows up. So again, here in this location, we want to put that information in. And I'll just type it, abbreviate it for the sake of time here. So that information we want to type out. We want to see the company name, and we want to see your name, so we know who you are and where you're from when you are in the Bluebeam Studio session. So that information is entered here in the general tab here on the left. We're entering it here. Down in Studio under servers, you can also enter that information right here as well. To set yourself up. So it's again in Studio, in servers, and in here in the display name. So you see this display name kind of shows up in a bunch of different places. One other place that it shows up is here in studio.bluebeam.com. So again, once you've created your Bluebeam Studio account, once you have that username and that password to log in, come to studio.bluebeam.com and go ahead and sign in here with your information. Oops, actually, I need to sign in a different. I need to sign in with this account. And go ahead and sign in. And when you sign into your Studio account, again, studio.bluebeam.com, you'll want to come here to the My Profile section. And in the My Profile section, again, one last time, maybe you want to set your information in as your default name. So it's weird that Bluebeam has 3 places that you have to set this up. Kind of 2 of them are repeated, but for the most part, if you go to all 3 places and you set your name, you will be in great shape to be able to work in the Bluebeam Studio process. So why are we here? We're here to basically get our Studio account set up. We're here now really to prepare our drawings for submittals, but ultimately why we're here is because we want to have our reviews faster. I'm sure if there was one wish that you could have is that the permitting department would work faster and get your drawings back to you quicker. Well, by creating a good set of drawings that has proper formatting, that has everything set properly, it's going to make the review process much faster. So it's going to make getting that permit much faster for you. And so I want to make sure I stress that, because really, I mean, right, that's our ultimate goal being here, is to have our permits get done a little bit quicker here. So I'm not going to make any promises for the groups, but I will basically do my best to show you how everything is set up and how you can submit drawings very quickly. So we're going to talk now about kind of the basics of best practices when we're talking about PDF creation. And there's basically 3 things I want you to really, if you're taking notes, I want you to write down. Number 1, no digital signatures on any documents that you submit or any documents that you're asked to sign for CCSF. No digital signatures. So some of you may not even know what a digital signature is. That's fine. If you are signing these documents, signing these drawings, putting your name on these, we don't want you to use any digital signatures, because through our workflow process, the digital signatures basically provide too much restrictions within the document that you sign, and that causes problems for us on our end. So number 1, no digital signatures. Number 2, submit the documents on their own. And what I mean by that is, if you're submitting a PDF, that's one PDF that you submit for a drawing set. If you're submitting specs, calcs, other items, one PDF for the specs, one PDF for the calcs, one PDF for any other supporting drawings. It's important that you don't just bundle everything together into one gigantic PDF and send it off in hopes that we'll be able to figure everything out here. We want to make sure that you understand that when you're submitting, it's one PDF per document type, okay? Now, that doesn't mean that each drawing page is on its own. The drawings are submitted together as one set of drawings, one PDF for the entire set of drawings, but make sure that your specs, your calcs, your other supporting documents are not bundled together. Number 3 is, we want to make sure you have the project address not only on the cover sheet, but on really every page, especially the sheet index page. And I'll cover that when we're actually looking at our documents, because now now we talked about it, I want to basically start to cover some of the preparing the documents for submittals. You have a PDF set of drawings, and there are a whole bunch of steps here that we want you to cover. I'm going to cover 8 of these today, a whole bunch of steps that we feel are important. One of them is obviously naming, document naming conventions for document submittals. If you don't get the name right when you submit, that's going to be a problem right off the bat, right? So, in Appendix 1 at the bottom of this, there is a whole file naming component summary. There's a component order, and what you probably all are looking for is the file name example. So This tells you exactly how to name your drawings. And it's important to note when you're submitting that you describe what it is, right? If it's drawings, call it drawings. If it's calyx, call it calyx, reports, etc. If it's a site drawing, it's a site drawing listed here, or a building drawing listed here. Don't just call it what we're going to see here, which is a randomly named set of drawings. Don't call it that. And of course, the reason is because, you know, people aren't going to have an understanding of what you're actually submitting. So I have my set here, and, you know, I'm basically going through, you want the application number. If the application is not there, you want the street address of the project, along with, if it's an addendum, and along with what it is, remember drawings, site drawings, whatever. And then if it's a revision, we'll give it a revision number, but we are submitting our first submission, so there's no revision at this point. So let's come back to our randomly named set of drawings, and let's make sure we name this properly. So here, if my address is 001 Van Ness Avenue, I'm submitting building drawings, then you can see that this is how the naming convention would follow. So once you submit, this address will be replaced with the application number, and then it'll be application number _ building drawings. So I have my first thing out of the way. Basically, I've named this properly. Let's come back to our table of contents. We're going to make sure we name it properly, and now we're going to actually get into the PDF formatting. So for that, I'm going to go ahead and open this up. And now that we have our set of drawings, let's talk about a couple things first. Number one is the blank stamp area. So on our sheet, and you see I kind of used the same one but moved it over to give emphasis, we want to have an 8.5 by 11 blank area here. And then in addition, so again, if you're taking notes, write down that 8.5 blank area on the cover sheet. And then on every single title block page, we want to include a 2.5 by 3 inch area here in the title block that's in the same location on every page. So again, coming back to my set here, this is an 8.5 by 11 area right here. And then on my pages in the title block, I want a nice big space here so that as I'm scrolling through my pages, I have this nice large space so a stamp can be placed on every page. So again, we haven't really even talked about the PDF so much yet. Really, we're still talking about how you set things up. And there's more best practices here in the guide as well, how to, you know, not use crosshatch fills. But really, if you focus on the 3 things I talked about earlier, I think you'll be in great shape. Excuse me. So now let's talk a little bit about some of the other things that I feel are important. And one is sometimes you're going to have reference drawings in your set, and you know, you're going to reference old site plans or things like that. And if that's the case, we want to make sure that as I cycle through, you see I'm clicking these pages and going through these pages. I don't have any pages that take like a minute or 2 minutes to generate, because when you scanned it, you thought, oh, I'll just scan it at the highest resolution I can so it'll look good. But really what that will do is it will cause issues. Really, any submission that's drawn here should really only be submitted at about 90 to 100 DPI. So any scans that you have, we want to make sure that as I'm cycling through, as you're cycling through looking at your set, you don't have any that take a whole minute or 2 minutes or 5 minutes to regen on the page. If that's the case, that means it's going to be 5 minutes for each one of the reviewers to regen as well, and they're not going to be happy and your document will be rejected. So let's continue here. Now let's get into some of the actual formatting, some of the actual setup here. There's a couple things that will make navigation much easier on this set of drawings. And maybe what I'll do is let's show an example of it so you can see what I'm talking about here. I'm going to go ahead and show this set right here. This is the same set, but notice how this set is different than this set. So a couple things that need to be done. need to be set up, need to be formatted in your PDF set in order for the submission to go smoother, the review to go smoother, and most importantly, the review to go much, much faster. So what I'm looking at right here, and again, this button may be anywhere in your Bluebeam, is the bookmarks. I'm going to focus on bookmarks, and I'm going to focus on the thumbnails. You're probably all familiar with thumbnails, even if you've never seen Bluebeam, you're in Adobe Acrobat, you've seen these thumbnails. Well, inside of these thumbnails, you can see instead of these being 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I'm actually looking at the actual page number and page name. And the reason that that's important is because if there is a comment made, that comment will then be put on a page label. And so every comment will be associated not with page 10, but with page A40. And, you know, if they're, especially if you're subbing out your reviews, let's say to some of your tradesmen, you know, you want your mechanical guy to review, you want your electrical person to review. If that's the case, you're going to need to know where the review comments are. And so the page labels will be important really for you as well, in addition to providing easy navigation and a lot faster review for you. So I'm going to show you how to do both the thumbnails, which contain those page labels, and I'm going to show you how to do these nice bookmarks. So you see these bookmarks here. What the bookmarks allow me to do is allows me to really just navigate through the pages really quickly. So you can see it's like a hyperlinked page index essentially. So I can go to my cover sheet, I can go to my sheet index, I can set everything up. We're going to show you first how to create those page labels and then how to create those bookmarks. And if you're using Bluebeam, these two are sort of interchangeable. And what I mean by that is, let's come back to our set where nothing's set up properly. And what I mean by that is that the bookmarks here and the page labels here, and again, they may be anywhere on in your Bluebeam. It doesn't really matter where they are. It's just that you find the buttons somehow. They're the button to create the page labels right here. See that little star? It brings me up to a thing where I'm selecting a page region and choosing a page range. If I was doing bookmarks and I click the little star button here, same location, it's going to ask me to find that page region and select that page range. So really it's essentially the same thing to create bookmarks or to create page labels. Now, one other thing that I skipped over here at the top is when I'm creating the bookmarks, I can create them from my page labels. So I can use my page labels to create my bookmarks. If I'm here in the page labels, I can use my bookmarks to create my page labels. So I only have to do one of these. I only have to set up one of these using this region command here, and then the other one can be done based upon the other. So let's take you through how to do this. And so I'm going to zoom in now on this kind of bottom corner here because I want to point out a few things. One is when you're submitting, one of the most important things that you can do, this is kind of architecture 101 here, is have consistency in your plan set. So what I mean by that is, notice that as I cycle through these pages, the sheet number is listed here and it's consistent. It's in the same location on every page. It's not listed as A57 and then A-57 and then A5.7 and then A57 without the period. So there's consistency in the numbering, there's consistency in the naming, and there's consistency in the location of everything. If I am including, if I'm going through and I happen to fall upon a different title block because one of my subs put in their own title block and I didn't bother to change it out or to make them use a consistent one, then you see going between the pages, this sheet number here and this sheet number here are in different spots. Same thing with the labels in different spots. And when it comes to prepping these documents in Bluebeam, the more consistency that you have in things like your title block information, the more consistency that you have, the better it's going to work. So I'm going to go ahead and show you now how to create those page labels and create those bookmarks. But just let's remember that consistency is going to be our friend here as we come through this. So I'm looking at basically you can start on any page. It does not matter where you start. What you're going to do is I would like you to start with the thumbnails first, because that's first here. And you go again to thumbnails, and we're going to select a page region. So again, to do this, all you have to do is click select it, and it picks up that information. It picks up that number that it finds right there. I'm going to put a space, a hyphen, a space, and I'm going to click add, and I'm going to add a second region. And add the region. You see, when I make this, I'm going to make it pretty big because I know some of these names are bigger than just this one line. Some of them are 2 lines, some of them are 3 lines. You get the idea. I'm creating this. Now, if you're using Revit, sometimes this information is created for you, and you might think that's a good thing, but what you'll want to definitely do is you want to check it to make sure you're sort of following the kind of basic guidelines here of having the page number and having the page name with some spaces and hyphens in between them. So I have clicked 2 regions. I clicked a region for the number. I clicked a region for the name. I put a space hyphen space in between them right here, and I'm going to go ahead and hit OK, and I'm going to apply that to all my pages. So all pages here will be getting those labels, and we'll have those labels created. So now over here, instead of this being page 49 and 50, it's going to be page A7.20 and then A721. So you can see now as I cycle through these, they all look really good, right? All of these page numbers and page names are looking pretty good. Now there may be situations where maybe it's not picking up this for one reason or another, and you may have to manually come in here and actually type in the information. You see how I typed it in right there, and when I typed it in, that fixed that. But for the most part, as I cycle through, everything looks good. Now let's go to our other page at the bottom. Remember I said consistency is your friend, and this is an inconsistent title block. So this title block coming from one of our other subs here is causing a problem essentially. And what it's doing is, because the numbering and the naming is in the wrong place essentially in comparison to the others, it didn't pick up any of this information. So if there was a group of pages, what I could do is I could basically start, and for that one page or for the multiple pages, I could, for the page range, I could go ahead and pick that, do my page region again and select it, or you can just type it in manually. But for the sake of repetition, let me show you this one more time. I picked a region, I put a space hyphen space, I click add, I select my second region right here, and you see it picks that information up. I click OK, and then I apply it to, in this case, just one page. Usually you would do this to a whole set of pages, and now you see it selected that. So again, when you're doing this, when you're creating your labels, again, you're going to page region and click select, and you're just making little windows around these sections when using some spaces and hyphens in between them. Okay. So what we've done so far in our steps going through here, let's see if I can go back to find my table of contents here. What we've done so far is we've basically covered some of the information about document naming, blank areas, and now we've skipped over a lot of this. It's important to do all this, but I'm skipping just for the sake of time. It's important to, again, create those page labels in the thumbnails, and of course create the bookmarks and nest the bookmarks. So let's get to bookmarks next. Coming back here to our fully perfect set, you see this is what bookmarks look like. Again, so the page labels we already did. what we're going for when we create our bookmarks is we want them to be organized. So I can roll up like architectural, I can roll up these, and if there are more trades added here, I can roll these up and very quickly be able to locate all the different trades using these bookmarks. So how do we create those? Let's come back here to our sheet that we just finished creating our thumbnails. And again, you know, I'm looking here as I'm cycling through, I'm making sure that all these look good. As I cycle up, it looks like all of them were created, and you know, they all look really good. Even my cover sheet looks good. A lot of times you have to fix that one, but I have pretty much a perfect set of page labels now that are created here inside of the thumbnails. So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to create my bookmarks. And again, remember what I said is when you create one of these, you can use the other. So to create my bookmarks, I will just use my page labels. I'm going to apply it to all the pages. I don't have to do any regions or selecting anything. All I have to do is pick page labels. And because my page labels here are perfect, I can apply those perfect page labels into this entirety of things to create my bookmarks. So I've created my page labels first. I checked those and made sure those look good. I came here to bookmarks and I just chose to use the page labels to create them. And when I did, you see it just copies all that information. And now I can actually navigate through very easily through my set of drawings because I have my bookmarks. One last thing to do with bookmarks is to nest them. And what that means is to organize them by trades. And we only have two trades here, so we'll do this quickly. Basically what you do is you go to the first page of each trade. So here's the first page of the architectural, here's the first page of the general. I right click and I add before. So I'm basically creating another bookmark right above it. And I'll just change this to say, for the sake of time, we'll just call this G. I won't type out general, but you put out general here. And then down here for architectural, I'll put it in as well. I go to the first page, that's important. Right click, add before, and then put in an A for architectural. So I put that information in. The next step is to actually nest these. And what I mean by that is I'm going to select these. So I could use Control and select these one at a time, or I could use the Shift key and just select the beginning and the end with the Shift held down. I drag it up just a little bit over to the right and drop it right there. And you see how now that nests it, so it can be basically nested right in there. I'll do the same thing with our architectural. There's our architectural right there. And then my one page for structural, let's add that as well, just to show you one more time quickly how it actually can go pretty fast right here. So you can see now, as we have this, I can very easily come in here. I can very easily find my pages. So think about this from the reviewer's point of view. Now, how much faster is it going to be for a reviewer to find your pages and review your document set because you spent an extra 20 minutes at the beginning setting all of this up for that review process? Your permits are going to be reviewed and submitted much faster because you've done this. Okay, so let's continue here. A couple more little things we need to do as part of this preparation for the submittal. I've done my bookmarks. I've nested my bookmarks. We're gonna skip over some of these. I want to talk about removing the layers and then finally flattening the document. So, we'll also focus, on hyperlinks as well. So we'll do all three of these next here. So coming back to my set of drawings here, you can see my bookmarks are looking great. My page labels are looking great. And when we do hyperlinks, that's going to be really important that these look perfect. Well, what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and talk about layers. So when you're working out of AutoCAD or even Revit, a lot of times what happens is it puts a whole bunch of layers here inside of the document. And normally it's not a big deal, but if there's ever a situation where someone comes in and accidentally turns off the layer, they may be turning off annotations or other important content on the drawing set. And I'm assuming you don't want that. You don't want a reviewer not seeing half of the document because someone came in and accidentally just turned off one of these layers. So ideally, what you want to do before you submit, you want to come into your layers and you want to go ahead and delete the layers. And when I'm deleting the layers, I'm not deleting what's contained within the layers, right? I'm not deleting the content of the page. I'm not deleting the annotations that are on layers. I'm making sure both of these are unchecked. I'm just deleting the layer itself. So that way, if this layer is no longer here, it will make it impossible for someone to accidentally turn off parts of your drawing. And so again, think of it again from the standpoint of we're trying to get a perfect set in that can be reviewed quickly and there won't be any confusion, you know, because some of it's missing and you'll have to come back and resubmit. We want to make sure that our submission is in great shape. Okay, so now let's talk about hyperlinks. I think you hopefully remember me saying, you know, setting up these page labels is really important. What we're going for here, let's come back to the cover sheet. What we're going for here is the ability for us to be able to actually click on one of these from the page index or from a call out and having it basically take me to that page, hyperlink me, link me to that page. And so let me give you some examples here. You can see that basement floor plan. When I go ahead and click, you see it takes me to that basement level. Now, a lot of times Bluebeam does have a back button. That's usually the first question people ask. There is a back button to take you back to that page. You may not see it here. It may not even be, you may need to turn it on, but there is a button to do it. Again, coming back here, I can go, and then if there's a call out, let's say there's a section call out here, clicking on that will take me to that building section. If there's a detail call out here, I can go there, see the detail, maybe go back, come click on this other detail, check that out, and then again, go back using my back button, and then finally, you know, go back to even where I started and go to the next set. So having hyperlinks within your document is really, really a nice feature. One thing I will say about this is in order to create hyperlinks, you need a special version of Bluebeam. So Bluebeam comes in 3 different versions. Most of you probably have the standard version of Bluebeam, but there is what's called an extreme version of Bluebeam, Bluebeam Extreme. Bluebeam Extreme, for the purpose of doing almost all of this work, it's only needed for this one step. So this is an optional step for the setup, but if you want to do this, you need Bluebeam Extreme to do it. So if you have Bluebeam Extreme, you should be doing this. You should be doing this anyway, setting up hyperlinks for your drawing set. Let me take you through how to do that. I want to cover basically going through and creating a new set of hyperlinks here. So again, batch link. If you don't see a batch link, you know, some of the older versions, actually it's really hidden. The older versions, the batch link is hidden. There's actually a batch tab at the top and then the links inside there. But for those of you using the fairly newer versions, basically from 2018 on, this is where you would see if you have it. Sometimes you won't have it, you won't even see it, and that's because you don't have the extreme version of Bluebeam. But I will go ahead and click it here. First, let me turn this off. Batch, link, and then we'll click new. Now, one thing that this is going to do is it's going to, actually, let me get this set here. It's going to take a look at your page labels. That's how the links are made. The links are made from page labels typically. So when I click batch and then link and then new, it's going to ask me to add the open files. Obviously, I don't want to batch link my applicant procedure, so I'm going to uncheck that. I only want my drawing set to be done. So I will click that and click next. And as I was saying here, the page labels is usually what you use to generate the links themselves. And what I mean by that is in a call out, you see the call out right here, it calls out A101. This will find A101 in the page label, and then it will say, okay, whenever I see A101 here, it'll automatically take me to page 10 of my document. And so that's how the hyperlinks work. The call out is for A101. It looks at the page label and says, oh, here's A101, but that's actually page 10, and it will take me to page 10. So I'm using page labels. I am going from the beginning over until I hit a space. And what that means is first from start, it starts at the left and works its way over until it hits that space right there. And then it says, okay, everything I saw to the left, that's what is part of my hyperlink. And so again, when I was talking about consistency, how it's really important in the naming that you don't have some that have dots and some that have spaces and some that have dashes. You can use other things besides spaces, but ideally you want a consistent set of drawings that has consistent numbering. And if that numbering is consistent, this should work just fine. So I'm going from the left and I'm going until I hit a space. So that will pick up A22 right here. I click OK, I'll click generate, and it will generate all of these. If it finds issues, it will tell you that there's issues. Sometimes people, sometimes you guys name your drawings with the same number. Or sorry, you number your drawings with the same number sometimes, and that will obviously cause a problem. But what it's doing basically, again, very simply is it's going to A10 and it's saying, okay, whenever I see A10 here, I'll create a hyperlink and I'll hyperlink it to page 5. That's all it will do. Now, you probably have noticed that I have a little yellow here. The way you do that is in the link options down at the bottom, you can create a highlight to include the yellow color, and that will set that up. Okay, well, let's go ahead and hit OK. And if I was to run this, what it would do is it would go ahead and run through and it would create these hyperlinks. And you see that yellow highlight there, highlights, so I can very easily find them. But one more way to find them is as you move your mouse over, you see how the mouse changes as I move it closer to the hyperlink. So that's how you can kind of tell that the hyperlinks exist here. And so creating the bookmarks, the page labels, the hyperlinks, removing the layers. Again, all of this, our ultimate goal here is to create a very, very clean set of PDF plans that we submit in for the EPR review. Okay, one last step that's really important is flattening. And basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to remove all of the stuff that's here in this markups list down here. Especially when you're using AutoCAD, a lot of times is AutoCAD will apply a whole bunch of their shape fonts all over the place in your drawing, and they will show up as tons and tons of markups down here at the bottom. So you want to make sure that when you submit it, there are no markups here in this markups list. You want the markups list to be empty. And the way you do that is you are going to go to Document and you're going to go to Flatten. Remember, we're not deleting the stuff down here. We don't want to get rid of the text that's been created. We just want to make it permanently part of the drawing. So we want to flatten it down onto the drawing. So you can do that here by clicking flatten. Some of you may even have a button up here that is for flatten. But basically what you're looking for, and again, in the older version, it looks a little different. It's kind of one of those, it's supposed to be one of these little manual rollers that you push around on a construction site when you're doing asphalt. Basically what you're doing is you're flattening this. You're looking to flatten all your markups, everything down here in the markups list, and you're making sure that everything is unchecked. Basically, you don't want it to be unflattened accidentally, so you want to make sure that you cannot do that. Basically, just going with the defaults and hitting flatten, you see now my markups list is empty. So going through these 8-9 steps that we just covered here, we now have a set of documents that the reviewers won't have any clutter down here, and when they're marking up, the reviewers will be able to find their pages easily, and when they make a comment, that label of that page will show up, and it'll make it easy for you to know what page everything has been made on. Of course, the layers are going to be empty, so nothing's going to be turned off accidentally. And then finally, these bookmarks now allow us to very quickly navigate through our set. So again, this is a 61-page set, not a particularly big one, and it took me, certainly less than an hour to go through and perform these steps that make this set of documents so much faster for the review process and so much easier for the reviewers, and most importantly, working towards getting a very fast permit review back to you. So one last step that's important as we are coming in here and we're preparing our files for submittal. Just note a couple things when we're looking at specs or other supporting documents. Remember, those are not to be bundled together. And there are a couple things we want you to do. We basically want you to make sure that it's flattened so there aren't a lot of text boxes or anything else down here that's been created. And now that we have everything kind of ready to go, one last thing is to get this applicant backcheck page located, downloaded, and inserted into your document set. Now, I don't know if you remember back when we were talking about the resources and the other places here on sf.gov, what I said was, one of the things is adding this backcheck page to your plans, right? And there's a link to it. It's very easy just to click and download it. No big deal. Essentially, it's there for you. It's in sf.gov, available for you. But basically what it is it's a page that you add at the end of your plans. And what it does is it applies a special status, a special menu that again allows you as the applicant to respond to comments, and the reviewers, it allows them to also review and close your comments very quickly. So just adding this page at the end of the plans is all we need to do here essentially. So we have our plans. We want to go to document and insert a page, right? I think all of you have probably added a page to another page here. I'm not going to add my procedure. I'm only going to add my backcheck page, and I'm going to add it at the end, right after the last page. So essentially, I'm inserting this backcheck page, this PDF, as the last page of my set. So I click OK. There it is, all the way at the end. There's my little guy right here. That page just getting added will add a special menu. So those are the steps. Those are, in addition to some of these others, the big steps. Obviously, there are others you want to look at when it comes to scaling, when it comes to scan drawing. I talked about that already. Setting scales. I mean, basically, what I covered are really, I think, the really important ones that really are important to focus on, especially adding those bookmarks, getting those that document flattened, getting that backcheck page inserted. All of these really will get you set up for your document submissions, for submitting your documents for electronic plan review. So let's talk about that a little bit. Let's come in back here. And again, when we were talking about SF.gov, we were talking about the plan review process, creating the PDFs. If I go back here, a lot of the EPR resources as well cover how to submit. So coming back up here under electronic plan review, submitting for a building permit application, submitting for a site permit application, going through the initial submittal goes through sf.gov. The initial submittal goes through sf.gov. The subsequent submittals will be done a different way, and we'll cover that when we get to the subsequent submittals. But just note that the initial submittal is through sf.gov. The subsequent submittals will be done directly into the Bluebeam Studio session. So initial submittals, sf.gov, subsequent submittals into the session. I will cover that in about 10 minutes or so when I get there. But let's talk about just the submission process. It talks about what to do, what I've just covered, creating the PDF set, making sure your file's not too big, naming the file correctly, adding the backcheck page, any addendum that you have to do. You know, there's a lot of this is outside of a little bit of Bluebeam and EPR, but it's just important to note that you really follow the instructions here. It covers everything on what you should do. Finally, you can submit. And when you submit, you go through and in some cases answering questions and submitting your documents. But let's talk about what we're submitting. Obviously, our initial submission here is going to be this set of drawings, right? That we've just basically created. We've added our backcheck page. Everything looks perfect. And so we're ready to submit. We will obviously save all that information, close it out, and then submit it through sf.gov. Once we've submitted through sf.gov, what's going to happen is it's going to go through intake, and eventually, if it gets accepted, if you've done all those things we've asked of you when we talked about setup, a Bluebeam Studio session is going to be created. And then what's going to happen for you is you are going to get an invitation to join the Bluebeam Studio session. So let's see what that looks like. Basically, what's going to happen is you will probably get a notification that you're in a session, but you will get this email, either this email or you'll get an email from CCSF that tells you that a session in Bluebeam Studio has been created. It will give you a session name. It will give you, you'll know the application number as well. It'll also give you a session ID, and basically you can just click and join into that session. Now, if you have trouble clicking this link, if the link doesn't work, you can use the session ID inside of Bluebeam. What you can do is you can come here. We're back in Studio where we kind of started when we did our account setup. We're here in Sessions. We click the little plus and we join, and you can type in that 9-digit code. Now, for those of you trying to join, I've locked everyone out, so you cannot join into this session that I've just created, but I will take you through what happens when you are in the session. So what's going to happen is the forms, the building drawings, the specs, all of the information that you submitted, that will be placed into the Bluebeam Studio session. You see the address of your building location will still be here. The application number will be here. The application number essentially consists of the date along with the 4-digit application number. So you can see that's today's date with a 4444 at the end here. And then of course the session ID, that information. Once you're in though, what you can do now is you can actually come in and open up your drawing set, basically coming in here to the session, joining in with going to the documents, and then locating the documents, obviously. Now for you, this is going to be nice because you did such a great job setting up your set. It's now going to be pretty easy for you to come down here and take a look in the markups list, take a look at these comments, and you're going to know, hey, there's a fire reviewer. There's some of my architectural, maybe my mechanical sheets have review comments. I can see by the page label here. I can sort or see by the page label what what pages have been commented on. So if I'm subbing out my comments to other trades, I know that I, you know, which ones, because I was smart enough to put in these page labels. And so now I know. You can also, you know, sort by author and start to look at the different departments reviewing. You know, there may be review comments from multiple departments. And so basically what you're doing here is you're opening up your drawing set from the session, and you see there's the session icon, and you see the session icon repeated. That's how I know this is a session document. You're opening up this set and you're responding to the comments. So comments were made by the reviewer that need to be reconciled. All the comments that are made need to be reconciled. So you're going to go through these comments one by one. And again, note that you can start to filter if you want to filter out. If you only want to see the fire ones, you can see the fire ones. If you only want to see, you know, the building ones, you can see that. You could run filters to kind of make this a little easier when you have hundreds of comments. But the reality is what we're trying to do is we're trying to come in and respond to these comments so that as we're creating our next submittal, our resubmittal, as we're creating that, we are responding. So if they come in here and say that you need to change the, you know, the tile on the roof or some other type of comment, you will note that, you know, that is something you will do or not do, and you will kind of be communicating your response based on the comment here. So again, it's this idea is that you can have this sort of back and forth conversation almost with the reviewer based on a comment itself. So instead of having to call and say, hey, on page you know, 27, you did this comment where you were pointing to the roof and I don't understand it, you can actually come in here and through this status menu, you can reconcile. So let's take a look at that. I'm finding my comments, and it doesn't matter where these comments are. I can just click on them here and you see it takes me to the comment. When I find my comment, you know, whatever comment it is, I am going to apply a status. So again, coming in here as the applicant, I'm going to come to this location in the status and I'm going to double click applicant's response to the comments. You're going to either incorporate it or you're not going to incorporate it. And if you are not incorporating it, obviously you're going to have to say why. But if you are incorporating it, everything's probably fine. You see when you incorporate it, you see the color changes now. You're kind of good to go essentially. But what you've said is, what you've communicated by just changing the status right here is that I have reviewed your comment and I am going to make that correction or that change in my subsequent submittal. I'll go through a few more to show you that again. Again, you can come here and double click. You can also, if you wanted to, actually right click and you can set the statuses here as well. It doesn't really matter how you do it. Just note that maybe you're going through, actually, let's leave that one for now. We're going through and we're responding. So again, if they say, okay, we want to verify that you have a certain type of light fixture here, you'll come in and you will set your status to incorporate, and you will make a note of that for your next submission. Now, let's say there's a situation like our roof that we maybe disagree. Maybe they want you to add a special type of tile or something else, and you don't feel that's you know, applied per code. What you can do is you can come in here and you can say non-incorporated, right? And then you can, again, all of these have the little per reply, but when you're not incorporating something, there's obviously going to need to be a conversation that happens and a back and forth with the reviewer to have them understand why you're not doing what they're asking you to do. So you're going to start out here by right clicking, and again, you can right click up here and you're going to add a reply. So I right click and click reply, not, I'll just say not required by code, whatever you choose to say, but just understand that, you know, the idea here is that you are having this kind of communication as to why you're not doing something, because obviously the reviewer is going to come back and check these in their back check process. They're going to see all the incorporateds. That's going to happen. If this is not incorporated, there's going to need to be some explanation. Maybe even there's a phone call. So maybe even some kind of communication, maybe not a phone call, maybe an email, something where, you know, you respond here that it's not incorporated, and then, you know, maybe there was some communication, you add your reply and you say, you know, per email, you know, et cetera, right? You know, it was agreed to that this wasn't required by code, and that we could get away with, you know, doing it this way. So you get the idea here. The idea here is that you're joining into the Bluebeam Studio session. You're finding the documents and you're finding the response comments by the reviewer. You're responding to those comments using the status menu down here, or right-clicking and setting a status right here. Either way, what you're trying to do is come in here and respond to these. Tell them you're incorporating them. Go into the others. If there's some question or anything else, you know, there should be some communication if there's ever not incorporation of these. And then what's going to happen is eventually now you're going to be creating your subsequent submittal. So let's talk about that a little bit. I will come in here, and my subsequent submission, right? We know what the naming structure, right? Because we looked at it here in the applicant procedure. We know that naming structure typically requires us, let's see if I can find it really quick here, to have the application number and the document type, or addenda if it's addenda, and also if it's a revised set, it will have a revision information set here as well. So again, you can see some examples here, but coming back to our subsequent submission, you see now I know the application number, right? So I'll put it in as the beginning. I don't have to put the address in anymore. These are still building drawings, but this is the second revision. So revision 2 now is what I'm going to go ahead and submit into back to the Bluebeam session. So we have covered joining in the session. We've covered responding to the comments and responding to the reviewer comments here using the status menu. We've covered basically everything up to the point where we're ready to submit our subsequent submission. Now, back at a little earlier, I told you that the initial submission comes through sf.gov, right? You know, adding your backcheck page, filling out your information, and then submitting through sf.gov. The subsequent submission does not go through sf.gov. The subsequent submission is submitted directly into Bluebeam, into the session directly by the applicant. Okay, so basically what that means is you have to click on this little upload button right here, and you have to go find your drawing and stick it into the session. So before you do that, what you'll want to do is you'll want to make sure of a few things. Again, following this applicant procedure, going through the document preparation for submission, all of these steps you have to go through these steps again for your submittal. So we want you in your Rev 2, in your revision 2 set right here, we want to make sure it has the bookmarks. We want to make sure it has those page labels again, that the layers are cleared out. And one of the more important things is that at the very end of this, hopefully you remember, you have that last backcheck page that you add in as the end page, the last page of your plans. So my revision set is properly named. It has its page labels. it has its bookmarks, it has its back check page, all of that information. You know, it still has the blank space on the cover sheet. It still has consistency. Maybe now it even has more consistency in the title blocks so that there's a blank area here. All of that information, you know, needs to be all set. There are no large scanned files that take an hour to scan to go through. All of that information is all set, and we're ready to submit that second revised set right here. So this one's good. I'm going to close out that first one. Here's my revised set. And what we're going to do to submit that is we're going to come to the button right here, and we're going to basically upload, and we're going to find that subsequent submission, that Rev2, click it, and go ahead and open it, and that will add it into the Bluebeam Studio session. So you can see now, we'll give it a minute to upload. What we're going to do is we're going to upload this ourselves. The applicants will upload into the session, and then they will notify CCSF that they've uploaded into that session. If for some reason you don't see this button to add the file, sometimes the permissions may have to be changed, but for the most part, you should be able to do this. So we're adding in our revised submission. Let's come back. Here's the initial submission. Here's the revised submission. And what will happen is the reviewers then will come through, and they're going to go and they're going to start to look at the comments that they made. So this comment was made here. It was set to be incorporated by you, the applicant. You said you were going to incorporate it. I will now go to the subsequent submission. I will check that section, and I will make sure as a reviewer, I will make sure you did it. And then I will come back to my initial one. And as the reviewer doing my back check, I will close out of that comment. So again, this is the reviewer. What they're doing in the background is you're going through here, just so you understand. They're going through and they're closing these comments out so that as you go through the different reviewers, as those different reviewers check, they will know that things will go forward. So let's say that there was a situation, back to our roof here, where you indicated you were not going to incorporate it. Maybe it was an email back and forth, but there's still some disagreements, and they may still, the reviewers may still take that information and they may still bring it into the next submission. So on page A32, what they may do is they may replace that comment again on your submittal. This is your revised set, right? They may add another comment here. They may change it. They may disagree with you. Just note that basically the idea is most of the comments will happen probably here. Most of the resubmittals will be one-off resubmittals where hopefully at this point it gets approved. But the reality is that in some cases, those comments could carry forward, and then you as the applicant would need to come back here and you would need to go through this process again of incorporating or not incorporating. You will need to submit another revised set, not just a revised page, but a revised set. And that set will be called Rev3. That will be the subsequent submittal after that. So that, and the means of adding that file will be clicking that little button to upload it and then uploading it from your desktop into the session directly. Okay. So I haven't taken a breath in a while. Let me see, let me review my notes just to make sure we are not missing anything. I think at that point, if you can get this far through this process, you are going to be in great shape. I mean, the rest of the process is basically just approval and stamp out. Basically, what will happen is once the drawings are stamped out and go through the full approval process, you will be sent a link. You will be sent a link to download your plans. So I think we should do some questions now. And I can go through and show anything else as we go. But I'm going to see if Rebecca is still around and she wants to maybe talk about some of the questions that we have from our applicants.
I am still around, and I will definitely, let me scroll through and pull out the ones that are relevant. There are a handful of questions from the audience about Apple and Mac use, so that's coming up, so hang tight. But let's do things specific to what Troy has showed already. So can you sign up and create an account without buying Bluebeam?
That's a great question. Okay, so there are a couple answers to that question, and if you come to the applicant procedure and you come all the way down to, I think, the very, very last thing, it's identified of buying or not buying Bluebeam, essentially, and what works and what doesn't. So each one of these sections that you can review here, some of them are just like make your drawings correct in the title block. Some of them require a paid version. Some of them require a paid extreme only version. And then some of them, some of the steps are free and will be in the free version. So one thing I will say is when it comes to preparing these documents, you need a paid version. When it comes to responding and reconciling inside of a session, joining a session, responding to the comments in the session, remember using the status menu down here, none of that requires a paid version of Bluebeam. It only requires the free version. And to get the free version, if you go to Bluebeam, just download any one of the trials. And they, you know, Bluebeam used to have like what they called a view version, which was like their free viewer. But now to get to that, what you do is you download the trial. And after you download the trial and that trial expires after 30 days, what it will be is it will be a viewer version. So with the viewer version, you can come into the session, you can look at the comments, you can respond to the comments, so your subs can do that if they want. You can reconcile, you can type in your replies, everything else. But when it comes to the actual prepping of the documents, you know, adding in these bookmarks and these hyperlinks and everything else, you need a paid version. Hopefully that answers that question.
Okay, and then there's a couple more, and then I'll hand it back over to you so you can get through all your content. Next question is creating hyperlinks a must? During plan checks, it's not uncommon to add details, then we'll have to relink everything.
I mean, what I will say is if you do go down here and you look in this, and we talk about the creation of hyperlinks, we do list hyperlinks as an optional setup step. We understand that adding hyperlink requires the extreme version of Bluebeam. Just know that if you do add hyperlinks, the review is going to go faster. It's so much faster when hyperlinks are present. So it's kind of up to you whether or not you want your review process to go quickly or slowly as to whether or not you want to add your hyperlinks. So I think that's probably the best way I can answer that.
Let's see. Do you have to save the document after you apply the names?
Do you apply the names?
That was a little bit earlier when you were doing the naming of your.
Yeah, you do. Certainly, as you're setting this all up, you want to make sure that everything is set and the document is named properly, and you do have to save it in order to incorporate those changes. So I guess the answer is yes. I'm trying to look through these as well. I'm starting to see if there are a lot of questions here. What else we got, Rebecca? Anyone else have? I'm actually finished with my content, so we can just keep going with questions.
Okay, hold on. Let me go from the top then.
We will, but I will cover the Mac users, and when we're done with all these other questions, we'll cover that, and I'll show that.
Okay, why don't we do this, Troy? How about you jump into the Mac question? That'll wipe out a good handful of these, and then we can come back in and wrap up. There's definitely some questions about process and where to find the links to things. So maybe we stay on the technical for right now, finish Mac, and then we'll delve into all of the questions.
Okay. You sure we don't have any other exciting ones that, you know, you want to? I need a moment here to find my info.
Okay.
So just if there's any other questions, you can, let me just see. I'm trying to find my.
Are plan check letters not required with the Bluebeam review process as opposed to in-house reviews?
That one, unfortunately, maybe Rebecca, you can answer that one. I'm not sure.
Actually, now I'm processing what a plan check letter. You know what? We will have to research that one for Matthew H, who asked that.
Yeah, you're not allowed to ask workflow questions. You're only allowed to ask EPR questions here.
And then for the workflow and process questions that we're not able to ask, we will we're going to log the questions, and then we will make sure that we post answers to all of these after the training. So hopefully by the end of the week, we'll have answers to all of the questions that we're not able to answer here. Here's another process question, but we'll ask it. Can we use the digital process for fire-only permits? Unfortunately, no. The fire-only permits fall into our OTC category, and those and OTC projects at this time are only being done in person. Matt question. Here's one from Duke Crestfield. It seems like submitting a full revised set every time a sub-consultant responds with a change is likely to result in a huge number of revision sets. Well, that wasn't really a question, but
I know that was something we definitely grappled with. I know that is an issue, but just by the mere way in which this is done, it's the way that has to be done, fortunately.
Okay, I think this question is maybe not a question, more of a statement, but let's put it out there. So the drawings will be submitted with the architect stamp only, without the signature? Question mark.
So that's a great question. What I said was I didn't want digital signatures, and so what I mean by a digital signature is a certified digital signature. Certainly, a stamp that shows like basically like a graphical signature coming across is anticipated and expected, but just don't use one of the certified digital signatures when you are signing anything. And that goes for any form in any document in this process, no digital signature. So it is a little confusing because, you know, some people, again, don't know the digital signatures or certified signatures. And so they just see signature and they put them in, but certainly a graphical stamp is totally fine. But just not a digital signature, a certified digital signature that has a certificate and that causes the permissions to be basically locked out. Basically what it does is when you sign something, it locks us out from doing other changes ourselves because of the nature of digital signatures. So we want to make sure we try to avoid digital signatures whenever possible in any document that we're working with. Okay. So I think I'm ready when we can keep going. I love these questions. These are great questions.
Let's do the last two, and then I'll hand it back over to you, and then we can come back to questions after. From Tom Meese, is it preferable to submit paper copies or by Bluebeam? Will paper submittals remain an option? That one I can answer. So paper submittals are still an option. However, as Troy kind of stated as he opened up, EPR, electronic plan review, is a much more efficient way for our staff to do your review. And so, you know, for efficiency purposes, there is a preference, and that's Bluebeam, and it's EPR for our staff. However, if that is not, that doesn't suit you, if you still need to pursue on paper, you're welcome to do so. But please know, we do it quicker and more efficiently in Bluebeam. Last question is how to add additional users to the Bluebeam session.
Ooh, that's a good question. So basically these sessions, when they're set up, they will be set up as unrestricted. And what that means is that you can provide your users with the 9-digit code, and then those users will then be able to join into the session. So one other thing you may be able to do, it depends on how the permissions are set, but you may actually be able to even invite people using Bluebeam as an invitation. But really all you need to get into these sessions is the 9-digit code that's associated with them. So you see it's listed here in my name. If I leave my session, you see it's listed right here as the 9-digit code I can use to go back in. So the answer is yes. The answer is you are allowed to include your subs. You may want to tell your subs about maybe the recording of this training if we have it out somewhere, so they can understand the reconciliation process. Even with your subs, we want them coming in here and we want them using this response, this incorporated, not incorporated response, so that we have consistency in the reviewers know the status of all of their comments. Okay. So with that, should I are we good for questions for the moment? Should I go back into the Mac users now? Should I talk about them?
Let's do it.
All right, awesome. So you're a Mac user, and Bluebeam unfortunately stopped supporting the Mac version of their software just about a little over a year ago. And unfortunately, a lot of this reconciliation process is not going to be available to you if you are strictly in the Mac world. So what we can do for those users is who specifically request it is that we can, we have an exhibit that we use, which is a guide for the applicants unable to access Bluebeam. So this is specifically for those Mac users. And the idea here is that you will be sent these files. These files will be sent to you with the reviewer comments, and you'll have to go one way or another, either through email or through the San Francisco Secure Share site. You'll need to come in and you'll need to get those files. Once you get those files, you can use Adobe Reader and to open those files up, and you'll still in Adobe Reader be able to see the comments. You'll still be able to respond to the comments. You'll still be able to reply to the comments. So those three things can be done. All of these screenshots here were taken from a Mac, so I know that it works. I did it myself here, so I know that that it's going to work for you, basically with the free version of Adobe Reader. This again is going to add time to your review process, unfortunately, because there's, instead of just joining into the session and adding your comments, you're going to have to wait for the staff to send you the file. Then you're going to have to find it, download it, open it up, and then respond to it, save it, upload it back, wait for them to get it from the upload, and then they will put it back into the session. So basically you're going to be adding quite a bit of time, unfortunately. Not quite a bit, but you're going to be adding some time to your review process by following this. But just note, this is Exhibit K. It's a guide for the applicants unable to access Bluebeam. So for those Mac users, essentially, this is the guide for you, Exhibit K1, which covers everything. And so that has been included into our workflow. We understand that it is an unfortunate issue that that some users have to deal with, but we've tried our best to create a workflow that accommodates that issue. Okay, so again, I'll open it back up to questions. We have about 15 minutes left here. If anyone has any additional questions, Rebecca, if you want to come back, I'm trying to read through these questions through as well.
Okay, I'm going to go from the bottom up, Troy.
Okay.
Okay, just for ease. So from Anonymous, is a narrative required in addition to the Bluebeam responses?
So typically no. If you're here, and you say that you're going to incorporate this comment, you don't have to add a whole narrative as to, I mean, it kind of depends on how well you want to communicate, but I don't believe it's a requirement to respond to every incorporated comment. So if they say, make this curb, make sure this curb is 12 inches, you can say incorporated, and then as long as it's in the subsequent submission that it is noted and everything else, then there won't be an issue. If you want, for the sake of, our job is to get our goal is to get a permit. So our job is to make it as easy as possible on the reviewer so that they know that you're kind of following along so they can review your stuff as fast as possible. If you want to do, say, incorporated and then right click and reply and say, a note will be added. In the instances where you're making a change that's maybe not going to be obvious, I would say absolutely add a note here. Like if you were going to create a whole separate detail regarding this to incorporate it, don't just make that a mystery that you created that detail. Make sure that you you actually do add a response where you actually come in and you make the comment, see detail, whatever, on new sheet. So I would say it's not a requirement for the incorporated comments, but it's probably good practice to do it on nearly every one. On the not incorporated, it's absolutely required that you say why you're not incorporating something. That's pretty obvious. So I think that hopefully answers that question.
Okay.
I see a question about how to determine if you have Bluebeam Extreme.
Mm-hmm.
If you come up here to review and you click about, you'll see what version of Bluebeam you have. So it's just, it's most of the time it's over in the help and people are always looking for it here, but it's actually for review, they do it over in this first menu and they say you can click about and you can see what you have. You can see I'm using version 20. There's also a version 2019 and 2018, which look exactly like this screen that you see here. If your screen looks completely different, that means that you're using a 5-year-old version of Bluebeam, and you may want to consider upgrading just for the sake of the efficiency here. All right, any other questions?
Are plan checkers required to email applicants to alert them that they have reviewed documents and that there are comments in Bluebeam?
Yes. So, there are kind of two parts to this steps here. Certainly, when you upload a new revision, you want to alert the reviewer. And then, as far as making your comments back and forth, I mean, incorporating your comments, you may want to do it with the reviewer, especially if you maybe a couple days go by and nothing seems to be happening. You may just want to send a quick email to notify. What you can also do, one other thing that you can do if you're the type that really is itching at every moment to try and get some response from San Francisco, is if you go out of the session. So you see I've left the session. I'm not in the session. I'm seeing it in my list right here. I'm not actually in it, but I'm seeing it. I can right click and I can click Manage Notifications. And when I click Manage Notifications here, what it's going to do is it's going to give me some options. So I can really kind of check all these boxes, and when like anything happens, when the reviewers go in and make a markup or do anything, you will get an email notifying you that that has happened. So again, to get there, you're not in the session, you're outside the session, you right click and you say Manage Notifications to get there. Okay, what else we got?
Does Bluebeam have a notification setting after plan checkers left comments? This will help us track a lot.
That's what I just showed, actually. I think that will show. That's part of the notifications is when a markup has been made. I think it's this one right here, you will get an email. So you may not want this on because you'll get 100 emails if they're making lots of comments, but for the sake of notifications, if you like them, then it's right here, right click, manage notifications.
Okay, here is a signature question. The DBI forms 3812, etc. have a certified signature page. To clarify, we should do a stamped signature, etc. And I think really you've been talking about the plans and making sure that they're accessible.
Right, but I think you remember I said don't use digital signatures on any document. That includes the forms. So again, you know, you may want to create a stamp that has your signature on it. Like you can see, here's my signature that I just basically signed and scanned and created as a stamp that I can sign my documents. So that's not a digital signature, that's a graphical signature. A digital signature is a certified signature. And when you see this document, see how it's unlocked right now? Everything is allowed. If I sign it digitally, I'm going to lock it down and I'm going to basically keep some of the workflow steps from happening on the San Francisco end.
Okay, thank you. All right, also, can you submit multiple permits on one set of electronic plans? Yes.
Sorry, what's that question? Sorry, maybe you can answer.
Can you submit multiple permits on one set of electronic plans? And
yes, I'm sorry, yes.
Yeah, we can. There is
the answer
a
is yes. Well, yeah, you probably won't notice any differences behind the scenes, but the answer is yes, you can. Someone asked about the actual document that I'm using. Unfortunately, I can't give that out to you guys. What else do we have?
It's linked on the resources page, so folks,
Perfect.
I'll put the link in the Q&A answers in a second. Could you please explain the difference between a digital signature and an electronic signature, i.e. image, signature stamp added in AutoCAD to the TTBL, to the table?
So one more time, we'll cover it. Again, a digital signature is a signature that uses an online certificate to verify the signer is who they say they are. Although it can be hacked, but whatever. So basically a digital signature is what you would do over here when you're going to signatures and you're actually signing a document and you're applying an actual certification, right? It's a digitally signed document that you have with a digital ID associated with you. That's a digital signature. That's the one we don't want you using because when you apply the signature, it locks out the document. What we want you to use is a graphical signature. A graphical signature is just a scan of your signature. So just a JPEG or PNG file that represents your signature. Those are the ones we do want you to use.
Okay.
I know there are lots of questions about how much time we're hoping to make this faster. I think people are asking about how much time is this going to save us? You know, I mean, again, some of it is up to you. If a drawing comes in and it has no formatting and it's a mess, it's probably going to get rejected, and that will add time, obviously. But if it does get approved or if it does get accepted, it's going to take the reviewers a lot longer, and it'll probably be kind of going back to the paper time, the paper process time. So we're trying to be as efficient as possible, and some of that falls upon you to create efficiencies by proper formatting of documents. Okay. Let's see what else. I'll read through as well.
Because here's one, because everything is handled, I think this has been answered, but let me just read it because it's a little bit different. Because everything is handled in Bluebeam, do projects submitted through this process still need revision clouds?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't want to answer that necessarily without talking to DBI. And I think Rebecca, we should maybe table that one and answer it later, because I don't know that we'll get a consistent answer, so I don't want to answer for them, and I apologize for that. But we're gonna, I think, try to respond to some of these questions that can be submitted formally, in a formal way. It's my understanding, it's my guess that the clouds are not required, but I don't know for sure, so I don't want to answer.
Okay, here is, so I've taken note. We'll put that in our follow-up with our departments and get and post an answer later. Here's a question from Peter. If comments can be clarified by the design professional, can the comments be removed by the plan checker and not require a Rev 2 set? And then there's a second part. Can the design professional add corrections directly to the set with the comment, or must you submit a Rev 2?
Those are great questions. Okay, so let's take the first one first here. The answer is no. Most likely the comment cannot be removed. I mean, the comment can be removed by the plan checker. Certainly anyone who makes a comment can remove their own comment. As an applicant, you certainly can't remove any comments, obviously. But I mean, I think that may be between you and the plan checker on number one. And then number two, there have been some, basically the answer is no, unfortunately. The design team cannot add corrections directly into the set. They have to submit a Rev 2 version. And that, I mean, unfortunately, that is we were kind of experimenting with allowing that, but I think we're not going to allow that. There must be a subsequent submittal. So the answer to that one is no as well. Let's just see. I want to just do one more thing before we run out of time. I want to come back here because, again, I said at the very beginning of this, a lot of you are going to be wondering, where are all these documents that I'm showing here? Where can I get this exhibit K1 or anything else, right? Again, let's come back to sf.gov right here and go to building permits, because right, that's what we're after, is a building permit. And if you scroll down, you'll see the electronic plan review, submitting plans, submitting for site permits, learning about the process, adding that back check page. And then finally, a little further down, you have the EPR resources. And then in the resources, you're going to see this elect this procedure that I've been looking at, that I've been covering here. All of this is right in there. What you're also going to see are some of the, like the non-Bluebeam user guide for the Mac users. You're going to see some of the other kind of creation guidelines, kind of pages taken out of the full procedure that could help you when you're just looking at like how a session should be laid out. I mean, we try to kind of cover everything here, what it all should look like for you. There are lots of resources, so be sure to start with sf.gov and go down to EPR and look for those resources. Okay.
Okay,
Rebecca, I think we're almost out of time. Is there anything else you want to cover?
I believe so. We are definitely out of time. So I do want everyone to know. So I'll work through the Q&A. We'll publish the questions and respond to everything. And we will work on turning a lot of the frequently asked questions into an FAQ that will appear somewhere on our website as well. I encourage you to make sure, and I assume most people are on the DBI communications list. That's a great way to keep up to date with changes that are happening to this process. It's new, so there will be tweaks. If you have feedback, we would love to hear it. Feedback should go to permitcenter@sfgov.org. Again, it's permit center, all one word or smushed together, at sfgov.org. If you have EPR questions, send them there as well, and we will answer them. And if we can't answer them, we will reach out to Bluebeam or a specialist within the departments to find answers for you. So we really appreciate everybody's participation today.
Thank you, everyone.
And thank you, Troy, from AECOM for presenting today.
No problem. It was fun. I love these questions.